Hi, I'm Renita Young. I'm a correspondent here at Bloomberg Radio, TV, and Quick Take. And I'm also host of Your Money Story, which is a personal finance show that airs on Fridays on Quick Take's Instagram page. And today we're going to have a conversation about building wealth for all. To do that, I want to introduce you to Anna Njai Conte, who is the founder and CEO of Dare to Dream Financial Planning. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Renita. I'm so excited to be here.
Great, great. So let's actually get right into your money story. You are a first generation American and your father's from Gambia. Mom is born in Puerto Rico and you were born and raised in New York. Tell me, how did you grow up relating to money?
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the most important things and what helps me so much, right? My parents come from very humble backgrounds, right? They were solidly middle class. They're both accountants. I just grew, but I think that anxiety that they had growing up really permeated so much of what I understood with money, right? It was something that I equated to for so long with stress and anxiety. There's not enough of it. People are always in debt. Those are a lot of the kind of things that I really associated with money for quite a long time.
Makes sense. A lot of people do when you think about it. But you also call yourself a first generation wealth builder. And one of your motivators are your three girls. Tell me, how do they motivate you, and why do you choose them as your motivation right now?
Yeah, I think once you become a parent, you're just there's an instant switch that goes on push you to want to do better and to do more for them and provide more than you had. For me and my husband, both as first generation Americans, our goal is really just to give our kids a leg up that our parents couldn't necessarily give us, right? They were trying to figure things out and really establish that foundation, or at the very least keep their heads above water, right? And so we have had a lot of success in our careers and have worked really diligently to be able to give our daughters more than what we had. My husband always likes to say, and this is a saying I've adopted too, that we don't have to reconstruct a house every generation, right? We
Hmm.
are able to pass down a real give my kids a leg up in a way that they haven't necessarily we didn't get, and our parents didn't have either.
Giving them a leg up and options is what a lot of people talk about. That's something that a lot of people talk about on Your Money Story. But also, you actually came from the wealth management industry, and then you describe it as getting caught up in the corporate shuffle. And so you lost sight of your dreams. Tell me, what did that feel like, and what was the turning point for you?
Yeah, it's really a difficult thing to understand. I think when you're in the depths of it, really see the how much it was affecting me now that I'm out of it. Right? You try your best to climb the corporate ladder, to get those promotions, to add more skills and add more value, and sometimes what that thing that you're shooting for so much ends up being is not necessarily as satisfying as you want, right? Or because of the realities of life, it doesn't end up looking the way that you wanted it to. And I think I got so caught up in that shuffle and trying to hit those new levels and follow the framework within the corporate culture that I was in, that I lost sight of what I really wanted. I think also, I was very much taught to be practical growing up, and the flip side of that is that I lost sight of dreaming and thinking beyond kind of this narrow framework that was outlined, and I think can sometimes accompany our corporate culture.
Absolutely. And so enter Dare to Dream Financial Planning. Tell me something. Who are your clients right now? And what are their biggest concerns?
Yeah. So I founded Dare to Dream Planning 2 years ago. Once I really was able to come out of that, I was able to say, okay, I need to do better for myself and my family. And part of that, it involves life satisfaction, right? And when I did a lot of thinking about who I wanted to serve and what that would look like, it really centered on helping people like my mom, like my grandma, right? People that were my sisters, my aunts, a lot of my friends who were doing all of the right things, right? They got the education, they had a good job, but they didn't necessarily have the tools to build wealth for themselves. And I saw a real disconnect between what I learned at work and then what my clients, the people who are my clients, have, right? So I work primarily with women of color, hiring women of color, and entrepreneurs, service-based entrepreneurs in that same demographic, usually in their 30s and 40s, who are aspiring to live life on their own terms and really build that generational wealth to transform their own family tree.
Absolutely. And so, can you give us just a little bit more insight? You've talked before about this institutional challenge and the shifting demographics, essentially, the demographics that you serve. Um, Talk to a little bit more about the challenges that the wealth management industry has had in serving these shifting demographics.
Yeah, this is diversity in terms of the wealth management industry and in terms of our staff and also in terms of who we serve is something that is so important to me, and I'm so glad to chat about that. The reality is that our country is going through a huge demographic shift, right? 2020 was the first year where the majority of children born are ethnic minority, right? The US is slated to be a majority minority country in the mid 2040s, right? Just about 20 some odd years away. 40% of wealth is managed by women. There are so many changes that are happening, right, in our country, and the wealth management industry, from my perspective, is not really poised to meet that. We are, in terms of our own ranks, we are woefully not diverse. And I think that also affects the quality of advice that we are able to give to diverse populations, given that we might not necessarily prospect in the right ways. I can speak specifically as a financial advisor, right? We're not able to necessarily prospect in the ways that will attract those clients. We might not even necessarily understand what their needs are
Hmm.
in terms of creating services for them that really can add value. I have a fun fact for you, Renita. The financial services industry loses out on $60 billion of annual revenue by not creating products and services that specifically meet the needs of Black Americans, right? That is a
Wow.
huge amount of money. And that's just that one population, right? You don't want to even you add in the Latino population, you add in the Asian population and other demographics, and that can really be a huge game changer if we lean into it and focus on it. I think the writing's on the wall, and it's really about whether we rise up to meet the occasion.
It does. That's huge, by the way. Absolutely huge. And so when you think about all of the power that this industry is not necessarily taking the best advantage of, what do you think the wealth management industry can do to meet the unique needs of these demographics?
Yeah. There are so many things. I think we have to, first off, we have to get outside of our echo chamber. I think we oftentimes just talk to each other and we don't talk to people in other industries and also talk to different populations, right? We've already touched on that, but that's the first thing. I think the second is to move away from the strict asset management model that a lot of the financial services industry uses, the wealth management industry uses, right? We have to be a lot more creative. There are people that are earning significant incomes that are not feeling as though they have the assets to warrant financial advice, right? And
Mm.
that's a huge missed opportunity, because if you take someone with a multiple six-figure income and you give them good consistent advice over a couple decades, that can be a really significant client long term, right? But you have to put in that effort and be willing to open the doors on the front end as well, and really just meet them where they're at, right? They might not have $2 million, but they might have it in a couple of years, and it's really about meeting them where they are. So I think that's we have to be much more creative and much more open to seeing what else we can do and how else we can do that profitably, of course. But I don't think those two
Mhm.
things are mutually exclusive as well.
Right. I was just going to ask you that. But when you look at this on the flip side, what can the populations do for themselves to help build generational wealth?
Yeah. This is so important. I think, you engage in a lot of these conversations, right? About your money story. I think that's part of the first bit, right? Really understanding
Mhm.
your cultural and social relationship to money and how that
Yep.
affects you, right? Not to say that it's a negative thing, but um, you know, I'll just share a personal story. I'm Latina,
Go ahead.
right? My family was very poor. Before they had me, right, in our country of origin, and so they had a lot of negative money tendencies, I think, that were rooted in that, right? They still kind of had that
Mm.
mentality, and that was passed down, and I think they didn't really realize they were doing that, right? Or that they could have lived life differently or treated their money differently had they kind of surpassed that. I think that's the first thing. It goes without saying, investing is the most important thing to do. It's going to be, investing in the markets obviously goes without saying. It's the number one way to build wealth. But also, I think investing can not necessarily be in the market. It can be, investing in yourself in terms of higher education, additional skills.
Mhm.
And really, lastly, I would say opening your mindset as to what is possible, right? It can be really hard to imagine more and strive for more if you don't necessarily see that. I fell into that trap, in my
Mm.
corporate life, and then also just in terms of my own wealth building, right? I didn't it I was lucky that I was in the wealth management industry, and I was able to see what regular people could do in a course of a lifetime
Mhm.
if they're diligent savers and investors. But if you don't have that experience and you don't have people around you, that can be really challenging. But I think really focusing on expanding your mind that way is so important.
Mhm. Okay, very practical advice. Now, one thing that we have to talk about, Anna, is how this pandemic has impacted wealth management. So, what surprised you the most about how the pandemic has impacted not wealth management, but building generational wealth?
Yeah. This is one of the things that brings so much joy to my life and what I do day to day. I see
Hmm.
so many of my clients thriving in such a beautiful way, right? So, they are having unprecedented liquidity events because they work in tech, right? And they're having, their companies are going public. So they're suddenly have this really substantial wealth that's tangible, or they're entrepreneurs and maybe they were really poised for growth before then. They're internet based, service based entrepreneurs, and everyone being at home has helped them explode their businesses, right? And really
Mm.
be able to save and invest and see what's possible in a new way, right? It's not all doom and gloom. And I think
Right.
we do ourselves a disservice when we paint, people of color, minorities in like this really negative way, saying like we're there. The statistics are there, but there are bright
Hmm.
spots to kind of that. And it's such a joy for me to be able to support my clients as they're building wealth despite what's
That's
happening around us in the world.
That is so good to note because we often talk about how minorities are disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus pandemic and many other things that have happened in our lifetimes. But it's important to note that whenever you see it, that not all stories are going that way, that there are some bright spots. So thank you for bringing that up. And so when we talk about as well, the value of having a plan and having advice and being able to really navigate this. Um, you spoke about before your deep respect that you've had for the resilience of people of color during this time. Can you just elaborate just a little bit on that?
Sure. I think that what I've seen is my clients are extremely hardworking, um, dedicated, committed people, and they've been able to leverage this opportunity, right? In the midst of having all of these unprecedented, kind of mass trauma events, right? I will call COVID-19 pandemic what it is, call a spade, right? It's
Hmm.
been very stressful and very traumatic for a lot of people. I think most of us. You pair that with a lot of what happened last summer in terms of the Black Lives Matter protests and the George Floyd's murder, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all of those things that
Hmm.
happened, and the fact that they are able to really step into their own power amidst all of that is just, and continue to be committed to, and actually more so deepen their commitment to their goal of building wealth for their community, for their family, in order to really impact change, is just so inspiring, and it motivates me to get up every day. It's really been beautiful to witness.
Very good. It has been beautiful to witness. And so, last but not least, I've got to ask you about markets. Now, economists have been talking about the K-shaped recovery and unequal recovery that we've probably already started to see signs of. Now, what's your outlook for the market, maybe for the next 6 months or so? Is there a particular area that you think investors should be watching?
Absolutely. I think, this, as much as we're all exuberant about vaccinations and getting back to some semblance of life pre-COVID, I think that we still have a long ways to go. And what that's really going to look like is technology, areas that make our own lives easier in terms of shifting into this new online era are going to be really crucial, right? I think that also there's been a huge mindset shift amongst a lot of the population that has benefited from COVID-19. I think what they're focused on is really shifting the power structures that have been in play, and really opening up their sort of the decentralization, right, of a lot of the sectors in our economy, right? So for me, that looks like alternate payments, right? That's going to look like
Okay.
technology, ancillary services for work from home. All of these things are going to be really important. I think the market, e-commerce as well,
Okay.
media as well. I think, and I anticipate that this is going to stick around for quite some time. I think we're in a paradigm shift, which is why it's so painful, right? Like it's this
Yeah.
long-term shift in the dynamic of how we're doing things, and those that are willing to adapt and rise to the moment and continue to innovate and change the way they do business are going to be poised well for the long term. So, I'm particularly optimistic about e-commerce, media, technology. That's kind of always the name of the game. But anything that
Hmm.
really is able to disrupt the traditional way we do things, and create a new way of doing things.
Disruptors, but on the flip side, which are areas that people maybe should consider staying away from, or that no longer really have the value that they once had, that you may see fading?
Yeah, I think anything that is really not rising to that occasion. So for me in particular, utilities are one that are not necessarily innovating the way that you see in other sectors. I would
Mhm.
say also some of the energy names as well. Once again, last year has really pointed to the fact that people are waking up to things that are not working anymore. And I think energy, and sticking with energy in terms of the traditional oil and gas, is not going to be beneficial long term as well.